In my time traveling, camping, and going to different countries, I've learned the importance of keeping things light. Bringing everything you need may seem like the obvious move until you have to carry it all around. Logistics when it comes to checked baggage, storage at hostels, and bringing stuff I never end up using has made me realize it's easier to just leave stuff at home. So nowadays, I make a conscious effort to downsize when I travel, and photography gear is no exception. The less gear you have, the less decisions you have to make about what gear to use, and the more you can focus on taking photos and enjoying your trip. Today, I'll be sharing you my minimal street and travel photography setup for 2025. It's the same setup I used when going to Japan and Southeast Asia a few months ago, so it's been tested. I'll also share with you the various bags and accessories I like to use that help make travel more convenient. Let's get started. Street photography. I do two main types of photography, street and travel. For street, I mainly take pictures of perspectives, cities, lighting, and people. And for travel, it's kind of the same, but there's more of a landscape and nature element to it. Scenery and views and things like that. There's honestly a lot of crossover between the two, so don't worry about the labels too much. My primary camera for street photography is the Fujifilm X100VI. Before this, I used the X100V, so an X100 series camera fills this niche. I do still use the V every now and then, so some of the images you'll be seeing in this video are taken with the V. The reason why I like this camera for street photography is because it's light, portable, and simple to use. Plus, it has the appearance of a normal everyday camera while still getting me the quality of images I can print and make stuff with. I can use it for everything from simple perspectives to photographing crowds to food or coffee shots. And I can bring it places where I normally wouldn't be able to with larger cameras. Because of its appearance, it's inconspicuous and people take less notice or are less wary of me. And I found that blending in for street photography is very important. As a photographer trying to capture candid moments, you don't want to draw attention to yourself. Sometimes you can't help it, you'll stand out regardless, but it's better to look like a tourist than someone suspicious. Furthermore, the focal length is great. The 23mm or 35 equivalent happens to be my favorite focal length for street photography. I find it to be wide enough, but not too wide like the 18mm. And I found that 35mm or 50 equivalent tends to be a bit too close for crowded streets. It also gives me the right amount of compression that I prefer to blur backgrounds, and although nailing the compression on this wider field of view can be tough at times, when you get it right, it's very satisfying. So something like the 23mm is the perfect middle ground for me. So that's my main street setup. One body, one lens at the size I like. Let's move on to travel photography. Travel photography. For travel photography, I primarily use the Fujifilm X-T4 with the 18-55. This has been my most solid and minimal setup for years now. I find it to be the perfect blend between image quality, size, and flexibility. It's got all the focal lengths to capture 90% of your photography without being too big. Similar lenses like the 16-55 were just too large for my purposes. Even this setup I find too troublesome to carry around at times, and I'll only bring it out on day trips to a viewpoint or a geospot. That's because it's still kind of heavy when compared to the X100 series, and sometimes I'd rather just use that. So I'll use the X100VI on a day-to-day basis and bring this one out when necessary. In fact, when touring the many scenic spots of Hokkaido, this was the setup I used. I found it preferable because it covered the focal lengths the X100VI couldn't reach, and sometimes you just needed something tighter. For example, if I'm photographing a mountain over here or a sunset over there, there's no way I'm walking with my 23mm all the way over there to get the right composition. Oftentimes, it's too far and you'll need a zoom or a tighter lens. Or maybe you're limited on time and you just need something to capture a variety of images instead of switching lenses here and there. This setup is better for that, while a single prime I like for street photography. There are limitations to this setup, however, a lack of a wider or tighter focal length beyond what it already covers. Because it's an 18-55, you don't quite have the reach a big telephoto would get you, and you don't quite have the wide angle to get larger perspectives. But that's okay. I found those shots to be more situational than anything, and it's rare that I'd find myself wanting to have a 14mm or a 200mm. If you're a more serious landscape or travel photographer, you'll probably know whether or not you need those lenses in the first place. Me personally, I forsake these end-range niche focal lengths for a reliable middle ground where I do most of my photography. Also note that an X-T3 would have been a good alternative here if I didn't need the flip-out screen of the X-T4 to record videos at home. An honorable mention to the 18-55 would be the Sigma 18-50 lens. I used this for a short period about a year ago, and it's a very good lens. It has a constant f2.8 aperture, making it better for night and street photography. Plus, it's just as light and portable, if not more. The reason why I didn't upgrade to the Sigma lens was simple. I had no reason to. The 18-55 already does much of what I needed to. The main caveat is its variable aperture, but I found for most landscape and scenery shots, I'll be using a higher aperture anyways. And for night and street photography, I'll probably be using something like the X106 or V. The 18-55 also has OIS, making it easier to do handheld video back at home. So the Sigma is a good alternative, but I personally haven't needed it. Let's talk about video. Video. A more recent addition to my travel setup is the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. In my time traveling, I wanted to not only take pictures, but also record video. Videos of the streets I went down, places I went to, me doing random stuff, all of which I could use as B-roll for these YouTube videos. And because I had my other cameras that I used mainly for photography, I found it hard to record video at the same time. Although both the X106 and the X-T4 record great video, I didn't want to keep switching my settings back and forth. Plus, I didn't want to go through the effort of setting up a bigger camera just to record myself eating or drinking coffee. So I needed something small and easy to use. For these types of clips, the Pocket 3 has been a game changer. Not only is it tiny, which makes it inconspicuous, but it's also really easy to use. Usually, it's just as simple as me turning on the camera and pressing record. There are some complications here and there like the focus breathing and angles, but nothing I find too bothersome. Auto settings and the gimbal work well enough so I can just record in one hand and take photos with my other hand. Understand that I'm not trying to get perfect footage here, usually it's just run and gun. I keep most of my attention on the composition of the photos I'm taking and will occasionally record with the Pocket. You can take more time and effort to perfect your shot with the Pocket 3, but that's less of a priority for me. The size is really my favorite component of it. I found it handy when traveling to a variety of places like street markets, crowded walkways, and even inside restaurants. I can just leave it in one hand and not worry about standing out too much or feel like I'm doing something weird. It's also got good pictures and is easy to use for selfies if you're into that. This saves you the trouble of setting up a tripod or asking strangers to take a photo for you. So that's the role the Pocket plays in my setup, an easy and reliable way to record video. Bags. I've got two main bags I use for traveling with cameras. The first one is the Brevity rucksack, which I've had for many years now. This is the one I bring camping into different countries. I like it because it has all the attachments I need. Clips on the bottom for a tripod, camera gear compartment inside with the door on the outside, a tablet sleeve, a water bottle slot, more pockets, etc. But lately, I found myself using this bag less and less. It's useful to bring out as a main backpack, but it's kind of heavy for everyday use, and I don't often need to bring everything with me every day. Another annoyance I found is that stuff can slip through the top compartment into the bottom one, as there's no clear divider between the two. So I use this mainly to house my camera gear when I travel, but I'll leave it at the hostel when I go out. The second bag I have is a recent addition I got specifically for smaller photography day trips. This is the Topo Designs Mini. I prefer this to the Brevity rucksack because it's lighter, more compact, and more minimal. This is great for keeping things light and it prevents me from overpacking. It is still quite roomy though. It has enough space to fill a portable charger, notebooks, tablets, a water bottle, chapstick, sunblock, and your camera if you want. Just note that the water bottle you'll have to put inside the bag since the side pockets are just too small. With this bag, I can also fit one camera inside like the X106 or the X-T4, while the other one hangs around my neck. That is pushing it a bit though. So this has been my main bag when traveling or going to coffee shops. I prefer this to a messenger bag because it doesn't hurt my shoulder. Messenger bags I found too heavy for one shoulder, and over time I found myself annoyed to put anything but my keys and wallet inside. So if you plan to travel, I'd recommend having a smaller backpack that you can use for everyday travel while leaving the bigger one at your home or hostel. Your back will thank you for it. Travel protective cloth. A game-changer accessory for my travel setup has been this travel protective cloth. And no, this is not sponsored. I don't know what it's actually called, but it's one of the better recent investments I've made. When traveling, you always want some kind of protection for your camera or lenses. This is because you'll be going to plenty of places, moving a lot of things around, and you don't always have time to slow down. Plus, the urgency can make you drop things, throw a bunch of stuff around in your bag, and sometimes scratch and damage your cameras. So what most people do is they get a camera case or a lens case. These are great, but they can also be kind of a pain in the ass. This is because they're often too bulky and don't fit well into most bags, so they don't work particularly well for my setup. So I chose to forsake some protection and opted to get this cloth here. This is a protective cloth I use to wrap around my cameras and lenses. That way I can throw my camera into my bag without worrying that it'll get scratched by my keys or something else. And when I need to put my camera down somewhere, I'll put this cloth under it. That way the camera won't get scratched by the surface of rough tables or rocks if you're out hiking. The outer surface is also semi-self-adhesive, so it wraps on itself quite easily. Plus, the tension is pretty strong. You can lift a decent bit of weight with it. Furthermore, it'll conform to the shape of your camera or lens so it's easier to pack away. There's none of this excess space you'd get from these camera cubes. Now, be warned, it's not a ton of protection. It won't protect your camera from all the bumps and bruises if you fall down, but it'll prevent all the minor little scratches. And personally, that's all I need because my camera is around my neck most of the times. You can also use the inside part of this cloth to clean your gear. I don't know if it's microfiber or not, but it's specified as a cleaning cloth and it works. It's also a great towel if you're going to a wetter country. When I was in Tokyo, it rained a decent amount, and although the X106 is weather sealed, it's not waterproof. So I'd use this towel to wipe some of the water off and clean the front of the lens so I could still take pictures. And if you're like me and use UV filters, the front is much easier to clean when you're on the move. So this, in my opinion, is a top tier travel accessory I'd recommend to any photographer because of how little space it takes up and how useful it is. Filters. In terms of filters, I'm not the kind of photographer to use a lot. The main ones I use are UV or clear filters, and I keep them on all my lenses at all times. For cameras like the X106, it's great because the camera is weather sealed with it, and sometimes you'll find yourself out in the rain glad you had one on. But even for lenses like the 18-55, I use a UV filter as well. This is primarily for protection. A UV filter helps prevent any scratches or scrapes that come my way. I found this to be a little bit of money that goes a long way to protect an expensive investment that is your lens. Many people claim that you can use a lens hood to prevent bumps, but I found them to be not as effective because it still doesn't stop stuff from coming at the front of your lens. I've had lenses in the past like the 50mm f2 that were saved simply because it had something in front of it, and a lens hood would not have helped in that case. So the best part about a UV or clear filter is that if some unforeseen accident happens, you just have to replace the filter, not the entire lens. Plus, most lens hoods pop out too much for my taste anyways. I also don't like to use a lens cap, so having a UV filter takes care of both things for me. They're also much easier to clean. Most camera lenses have all these ridges and stuff on the front, making it hard to clean when you're on the go. But UV filters are just one layer, and I can wipe the front and be on my way. Now, the common argument against UV filters is that you're lowering the quality of your images by putting cheap glass in front of expensive glass. But truth be told, I haven't noticed any significant drop in image quality from using UV filters. But maybe I'm just not pixel peeping hard enough. Besides, if you're that concerned, you can simply just get a quality UV filter like a B&W one and you'll be fine. So, if I'm being mean, most of these people that complain about the quality drop probably don't go outside much to take photos anyways. Because plenty of great photographers have taken great photos with crappy gear. Image quality be damned. So anyways, if you want to use a UV filter or a clear filter, it's up to you. That was why I prefer to. CPL filters. Besides UV filters, there aren't too many filters I use. But a recent addition to my kit has been this B&W CPL filter. I experimented with it a bit in Japan as it's supposed to bring out the contrast and whatever in your images. I also knew I'd be in the car or trains often, so I was hoping the CPL filter could help kill the reflections as I took photos through windows. It did to an extent, but it wasn't perfect, and I did find myself getting a bit annoyed with it when taking photos in Hokkaido. I was photographing a famous crystal blue lake in the northern regions of Japan, and the CPL filter was giving me problems. This was mainly because of how polarization works. I was switching between landscape and portrait shots and had forgotten to rotate my CPL filter at the same time. So some of my images had a stronger contrast in color, others did not. So I found that to be a bit annoying, but it wasn't the CPL filter's fault, it was mine. When using CPL filters, always remember to adjust your polarization, meaning you have to move the ring in front of the filter to match the correct direction of the light. Otherwise, you'll have two images that look different in both color and contrast. If you forget to do this, it'll be hard to fix in post. So it's great when you remember to do it, kind of lame when you don't. It also means that's one more thing you have to keep in mind if you decide to take photos with a CPL filter. Straps. The main camera straps I use hasn't changed much. These are the Moment leather camera straps. They're a reliable camera strap I've been using over the years that work for both cameras and phones. The reason I like them is because they look nice and also feature an easy removal feature. It's not quite as streamlined as the Peak Design clips, but it works. And I can switch straps quite easily. Plus, most of my cameras are fairly light, so I don't need the heavy-duty stuff anyways. They're also interchangeable, so I can bring and use one strap for two different cameras. I typically do carry two with me, so I can switch cameras without having to switch straps as well. Now, when I was in Japan, I also picked up this phone camera strap. I wanted to try something different and see if it worked. This one just clips to one side of the camera instead of both, and because of this, it's a bit easier to lift and shoot while I'm on the move. I have found that the strap stretches a bit, making it easier on the shoulder but a tad more awkward when hanging. So a plus here, a minus there, it's fine. I'll use whichever one I find comfortable that day. So here's a quick overview. This is my minimal street and travel photography setup for 2025. For street photography, I use the X100 series cameras. These are light and easy to bring around, so it's often just this and my backpack, and I'm on my way. For travel photography, I use the X-T4 with the 18-55. This covers most of my bases without being too bulky. It's not as convenient as the 6, however, so I'll leave it at home base if I'm not going anywhere special like Mount Fuji. As for camera bags, I have two. One is the Brevity rucksack, second is the Topo Designs Mini. The rucksack I'll use for bigger days and to just get all of my stuff over. The Mini I'll use most of the times for everyday use. Another recommended travel accessory is this travel protective cloth. It does a bunch of stuff and will just make your life easier. As for filters, I keep a UV filter or clear filter on at all times and use a CPL or mist filter occasionally. And straps, the Moment leather camera straps, have served me well over the years. So that's my minimal street and travel setup. I hope you found this interesting or useful. If you did, please share this with a friend. If you want to learn more about photography, check out Photography Essentials. It's free. And if you would like to help support me, you can add to the travel fund on my website or get a copy of The Sinking Sun, my latest photography zine. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.